Thank you all for joining. We covered business owner organization. We covered architecture. All of those webinars available. Last session was process techniques, comparing Agile, Waterfall, Kanban, and Lean, which wasn't listed here. So the next two sessions are an introduction to product management and product management techniques. So today's session, we're going to cover more about strategy and the whole role of product management, where next session, we're going to get into what product managers should be doing to design for the customer. All right, so this will be the list of topics. You'll be able to jump to them in the review or when we send you the PDF after our session. We'll try to get through the first 6 topics today, and then we'll leave the bottom for designing from the outside in are more of the tactics. So the first thing we want to start out with is something you probably won't see anywhere else, which is called our adaptive product teams model. And what this is designed to do is to address your business model. One of the challenges we've seen in a lot of clients, and particularly of different types of industries, is what does the role of product mean in your industry? So the way we like to look at this is a 2x2 matrix, particularly with quadrants, and it's based on one dimension, you are the product. And in this aspect, what you make or sell is a digital experience. Where going further back, what you make or sell is not the digital experience. It could be humans or machines that you're selling. And so that's the distinction on this vertical axis. This left to right axis is, are you closest to the product team, to the customers? Is the product team closest to the customer, or some other teams closer to the customer? In general, more to the right is more of a B2C. You're directly working with consumers. On the left, it's more you are focused on working with businesses. And so you probably have a customer support team or a sales team or a marketing team. These are pretty important because when you just read the standard product management literature, we see product managers struggle to understand where they fit in the organization. So your role as a product manager is different based on which quadrant you're in. The larger the company, you actually may have different product lines and you may sit within different quadrants. So let's walk through some examples here. On the far right side, upper right, this is what we call B2C digital native. A lot of us came from eBay. We operated in that space. PayPal was also in this far upper right space. Amazon in many ways exists up here. Facebook, LinkedIn are in the top right, although they have some aspects of the market that may be in the left. So if we go to the left, in this case, you're a product partner. These are typically software as a service. You're a big business. You have large sales teams they're the ones that talk to the customers and the prospects more often than the product team does. The bottom right is what we call a product amplifier. So these are traditional businesses, could be a high-end retailer. Think of Coach, leather goods, or even a newspaper, because they started out in some analog world and parts of their business are being moved towards a digital experience. So you're kind of shifting some aspects of your delivery to becoming more the product. The bottom left is more of an enabler. This is typically B2B. You're probably manufacturing. You could be in electricity generation. These are bigger industries where the engineers in the company are not software engineers. They're typically some other kind of engineer, whether electrical, chemical, or civil engineers in the bottom left. So your role is very different here when we say product, because in many cases, you're not the product. In the case of a newspaper, the news is the product, not necessarily the digital experience of a newspaper. So by show of hands, how many of you are in the top right in your current business?
Product thought leaders.
You're typically B2C. Okay, Christopher Sharma, good. All right. By show of hands, how many of you are in the top left? Typically B2B. Yep, definitely Eric.
Good. Eric.
Yeah.
And Stephen. Good.
Yeah. Are any of you in the bottom right? No show of hands. All right. And I'm assuming none of you are in the bottom left. You're not working in those businesses. All right.
Yeah.
Nicholas, okay. All right. So some of the pitfalls we've seen of folks that are in the wrong quadrant or operate the wrong way. So you need to be a product enabler. In the bottom left, if you operate in this world, if you ever leave your current company and you go to, say, a manufacturing company or electricity generation company, you're going to have to educate people. What does digital product management mean? Not product management, but digital product management. In the bottom right, you're now considered what's an amplifier. And so what we always see is a turf war in this bottom right. We saw this from one of our former colleagues who joined us, who actually wrote a lot of this material. She went to the Guardian, and we have a case study for her work. But when she went to the Guardian, a leading newspaper in the UK and actually a global brand, the emergence of the digital team was perceived as competing with the news team. So this is where a lot of this IP came from. So you'll also have to delineate between how does product management help your core service of whatever you're trying to deliver. In the top left, what we see are turf wars. Who gets to speak to the customer? Who really gets the input? This is very common in older software as a service companies where you sold on-prem, you needed a direct sales team to speak to the customer, and product was lagging at that point. So that's the challenge there, is understanding who owns the relationship with the customer and getting that agreement primarily with sales, but also with customer support. In the top right, what we see is too much focused on execution and not enough on strategy and leadership to really focus on the market. They really just become feature factories, and that's what you want to avoid. So those are the pitfalls you want to avoid. Ways to adapt. So if you're in the bottom left, your focus is enable. You want to ease the burden, educate folks, embolden them. In the bottom right, you're trying to amplify, inspire, facilitate whatever the current product or service is. Top left, you've got a partner because the sales teams are very powerful. Customer support teams are very powerful. You have to partner initially to earn the right to become a leader to them. And then in the top right, you are leading. You've got to focus. You've got to innovate, and you've got to have a belief that you're helping your customer. So those are the attributes that we've seen. Before we leave this, are any of you operating in more than one quadrant? Are any of you managing where you're in the top right and the top left? Okay, you're dealing with both. Sharma,
Sharma.
can you just provide a quick anecdote of what that means to you?
Yeah, we have direct-to-consumer products and premium services and so on, but we also provide the infrastructure as well as APIs for partners to, from a B2B perspective, to be able to utilize and incorporate our services into their products.
Very good. The reason we want you to think about this is not all product managers in your organization should do the same things. They're going to need to do different tactics or different approaches. Not so much what we're going to cover today, but in next week's session in 2 weeks, they're going to identify different personas, different journeys, different use cases, and so they'll do discovery differently, and they may be in a different relationship. For example, you're different sides of the business. You may have to let the sales team work with them, or another team's leading. In other cases, you need to lead and do the customer research and discovery. So it's real important you understand that if you manage a product team, that you don't have everybody do exactly the same thing. You have a question, Sharma?
No, a comment.
Okay.
If we, on our DTC side, we predominantly rely on marketing, product marketing to kind of drive the conversions and so forth, product/product marketing. But on the B2B side, we have sales channel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. All right. So let's get into what a product manager is. Who knows the difference between a product manager and a product owner?
It depends on different companies. Some of them are inward facing and some of them are outward facing. Companies define their own ways of calling it.
Exactly. We're going to use a baseline here just for our terminology. So in our case, the product owner versus a product manager is a subset. And in particular, product owner is a role within Scrum. They're the ones writing the story, shaping the backlog, trying to operate as a representative of the business, whereas a product manager is a real job title. You are actually trying to manage a business. And think of it like you're running your own line of business like a general manager. So I want you guys to read these bullet points here. This is from Ben Horowitz, one of the two folks from Andreessen and Horowitz. And it's an older definition, but I still like it. I'm not going to read it out, but I'd like for all of you just to read it quickly, and then we will just have a brief discussion on this slide. All right. How many of you think your current product managers have this mindset and think this way? I'm going to, okay.
One.
One. Very good. Are you the product manager?
I am not, but we hired people that were brand new to product, so I was able to influence a lot there, and they're crushing it now.
Good. Very good. It's a very different mindset, right? That's one of the reasons, just by if you read this, why we caution taking business analysts and making them product owners in Scrum, because you really want them to be product managers. And that's why a lot of times a business analyst is more of an order taker versus a product manager, which is someone trying to manage and lead the business. So it's a very different mindset, and it's a very different career path and different training. All right. We're going to walk through the foundations of what's an essential role of that, and we're going to try to define product a little bit more. So what does product mean? This is the definition from Webster's. This is an older one. If you pull it up, you might see some slightly different ones. But if you just kind of read these things, it's what's created, right? Product is the item that's created if you read these here. Okay. We've asked our clients what is product, and I'll let you read these. The function of product management, anybody reporting to head of product, it's a group of teams that have product managers, user researchers, designers, or it's the small autonomous delivery team squads with the product owner. People think of product that way. What is missing from this definition?
The customer.
Exactly. Yeah. Is there a chat that I'm missing that? I need to pull the chat up.
No, sorry, that was a spontaneous response from me. I should be quiet.
Okay, everybody but Doug, answer the question. No. Yes, that's exactly it. It's really it's the customer and the market. And we can't really call it marketing because there's already a function that's doing that. So Marty Kagan, if you read his material, he was at HP Labs before he got to eBay, one of our colleagues there. He describes product as a function of the customer times the business times the technology. And so he explains this out in a bit more detail. But if any of these numbers here are zero, if you don't understand the market, if you don't understand how your business operates or how technology works, your function is zero as a product manager. So you have to understand all three of those aspects. So this is a very important formula. Probably the first thing you want your product managers to understand that they need to know all three of these. So the reason it's important, you're really trying to have a focus that it's user-centered, and you're working with data, working iteratively with small teams, and you understand the customer and the market. That's how teams think about it. That's market-focused, particular subsets of customers. They need data to understand what works, what doesn't work. We already talked about small teams that are powered and they work iteratively. We discussed that last week. With focus, that's the long-term, your OKRs, and the ability to adjust course. So that's the vision of your product teams. But on the far left, it's really customer and market specific. So we're going to spend more time today discussing that. All right. So what's more important for a business, for a product team, measuring output or measuring outcomes? Okay. So think of this. Outcomes are customers, user stories, features, product. Outcomes, problem solved, revenue, customers behaving changes. Which one is more important of these two for your business? Yeah, exactly. It's outcomes. Which one is easier to measure? And you can answer in the chat. Yeah, output's much easier. So a lot of folks just stop there because it's easy to measure. But ultimately, you're going to have to spend the time and effort to address outcomes. Create the OKRs up front, create the telemetry to make sure you're tying to those outcomes. And I think we discussed that last week in our V model of OKRs, you're delivering output, and you tie out those feature usage back to outcomes. Are you getting the business problem solved that you want to? So the impact to the organization's bottom line is outcomes, and output is obviously easier to measure. So you need to understand the items on the left, but it's more important that you understand the items on the right and measure those. All right. So these are some of the foundations of when you are trying to build a product management organization. There's really 4 areas when you build this out. And you'll see some terms here that are not very engineering specific. On the left, it's more product focused. And so you'll have to understand some terms that may sound a little soft and fuzzy in marketing, but they're very important to your teams and how product managers think and operate. So they're setting up for success, the reasons to believe, why you come to work, discovery and delivery, and looking into some of those details, the fundamentals. These are just the basics, blocking and tackling, the reasons to believe. That's your vision and strategy, which we're going to spend more time on today. We're going to briefly touch on discovery, which is really three aspects of discovery. What are the opportunities to identify, picking the right ones, and then validating solutions within there. And then delivery, build, measure, and learn, maintain, which we've covered more about that last week. So digging into that a bit more, the fundamentals are making sure your roles and responsibilities are clear, that you have a product operating model, a career progression framework from intro product managers, those that came from a different background. Product managers may have come from a business analyst background. They may be just a subject matter expert in the field that used to be in sales, maybe technical sales, maybe in their customer support or customer success. They will have to pick up some skills that they may not have before. And then just your ways of working. Washed out devs make great PMs. Good point there. Vision and strategy. That's your vision and strategy, which we'll talk about later. And then opportunities, validating them and testing them out. We will walk through that a bit more detail, but a lot of folks just kind of brush over what discovery means, which is picking the best opportunities, prioritizing them, and then finding the right solutions. Versus flipping that, a lot of folks will jump to solutions and then try to identify what the opportunities are that they solve because they have a vision. And then, of course, your build, measure, learn. That's pretty common for most of you. So the operating model, shared OKRs, a collaborative strategy process, a clear framework for deciding what you're going to do and not do, focused on outcomes, having that set budget, and a communication and demonstration rituals. You got to constantly be showing feedback, getting that customer feedback. If you run into some territorial disputes, that's where a RACI framework is helpful. Some of you may have heard the term RASCI, but it's the same thing. But you need to have a consistent rhythm. So product managers need to have basically their own operational cadence, and that drives the business. So the ways of working, we're going to walk through these, that you're market driven, you understand the customer's hierarchy of needs, you make decisions to supported by data, and that your roadmap is focused on outcomes and not outputs. So we've already covered those. We're going to focus a little bit more on what market driven means. All right. So busy slide here. This slide is meant to show that you understand in your space that you compete in, what are the different levels or areas of submarkets within there. And this example here is a study of an investor who looked at the education technology space. And when you look at all the ways that you could help either a small K through 12 or a university or someone that's doing a later post-career teaching, such as what you're doing right now today, those are a lot of different aspects. And within those are some smaller domains. This is just a set of logos that you understand who competes in these different submarkets here. So we had a client that was in the education space. They had acquired 20 some learning management systems, and they realized they needed to consolidate those down. In order to do that, they needed to do a market study like this. A lot of you may not have the time, you're too small to do this, but someone on your team needs to think this way and operate this way to understand, what market do I compete in? What are the submarkets I compete in? Who are my competitors there in those different submarkets? So seems kind of busy, but how many of you think this way or operate this way today, where you understand what's called the marketscape of the major markets and submarkets that you compete in? By show of hands.
Nobody. Oh,
Oh,
Chris.
Christopher. Yeah.
There you go.
Just quickly, can you just let folks know what you do compete in, what you don't compete in?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do, as I shared earlier, are social media insights to inform different areas through the product development lifecycle for our clients who are biopharma or therapeutics. We get asked a lot about recruitment because recruitment's obviously a major pain point for part of that development lifecycle. But ours is mainly insights, but another sub-market in there because of our approach to gleaning the insights, because a lot of these communities are private communities that we partner with to get the insights, gives us unique relationships with them, but we're not like fully equipped to be a recruitment company. It's just a different market and some different approaches in there. So we kind of stay in this lane of like, for now at least, providing insights for mostly like patient advocacy units, med affairs, and clinical ops, but then not going into things like getting more into recruitment, like sub-market of what we're doing in terms of like this patient engagement approach that we use.
Got it. So the main takeaway I'd like for you to have as a team is your CEO is thinking this way, should be. They should have a mental model. Your head of strategy should be thinking this way. But as you can see, it's a lot of work to really cover the market, and they might need help. So as a team, you might delegate some of these responsibilities out to your team if there's not something like this today, to understand the submarkets that each one's in, because you'd like to know your competitive threats, potential partners in each of these submarkets. But do understand that your CEO is thinking this way. Some of your investors think this way because they want to know how big your market is. And a head of strategy might be doing this. Head of sales really needs to know this so they know who to go after and who not to go after. This is another one. Looks busy. One of our clients was in the auto technology space. You wouldn't think so, but there's a lot of software vendors that are focused on either the OEMs that make cars, the dealerships that sell the cars, or the service shops that service the cars. So a lot of software vendors in this space. In your markets, you'd be surprised once you add all the logos and organize them. There's a lot of them in this space. So this is the outside in, understanding the partners and the threats in your market. So think about this. You should have this somewhere in a board internally, but you might need multiple people to create this. So again, this is who you compete with and how you compete in certain markets, and some adjacent ones that you may need to partner with, because you might see logos in a similar one. Those are good potential partners in your case, and they could be partners for getting deals, or potentially you buy them, they buy you. But it's really good to understand we call this the marketscape. All right. So based on the market, you're either going to be market leading or market following. Market leading means you're trying to build a platform to differentiate yourself from others. Some cases you may be in a business that's called market following, where you are trying to very quickly mimic things, and it's your non-platform capabilities, the additional things that may be outside of your core, that have you differentiate yourself from others. So it may not be the core capabilities of the product, but it could be the human services that you're providing. But either way, you need to understand which approach you're in, or you're going to have a conflict of lead versus follow. We generally want our product managers, though, to have this leading mindset where possible, and so that you understand where those conflicts are, or how you approach the market. So again, the goal is to lead and win in market, but understand you may be in an operating model or business where you are a quick follower, and the product itself is not what is the key buying decision. All right, next topic we're going to cover is the hierarchy of needs. What the hierarchy of needs is, it's just a simple graph of, as you think of features, of what's important to users and what their perceived importance is. So internally, you want to have to strike this right balance of items that are just good enough for the customer. What we've seen is some of our customers will spend a lot of time on things that they think are very important, but are not that important to the customer, or they miss some really obvious low-hanging fruit. Just a quick example to explain this, that our former colleague explained, is she was doing some work for one of the leading rug companies in the UK, and they're high-end rugs. Think of $10,000 to $50,000 rugs that you would put in a particular house. And their digital team thought, what we really need to have is a augmented reality experience where I could see that rug in the room. And so they built a very expensive little platform to do this augmented reality. They went and tested it to the market, and they realized, well, their major buyers of those rugs were interior designers. Interior designers don't need that capability. All interior designers needed was a very accurate color swatch, which was a much cheaper solution. So the idea here is not trying to build things that your customers don't want to buy. Understand the key customers. And a good product manager should be thinking this way, of only investing in the items that customers really need, and to avoid over-indexing on a existing customer set or feature set that your loud customers ask for, versus items that are not as important to the new customers that are trying to buy these. So this is the hierarchy of needs, just making sure you only build enough of what's needed to win new customers and satisfy your current customers in your market today. So make sure that you're meeting and exceeding the most important needs, but also recognize where you're failing to meet their customers' most important needs across your product line and all of the capabilities that it has. All right, the other aspect, we talked about this, small autonomous teams. Committees really can't make good decisions. So we talked about this early on in organization design, about increasing communication and overhead based on the size of your team. As you get over 6 to 12 people, that's the ideal size is no more than 12. Anything larger than that, we call it the danger zone. So we'll leave behind this example of the chicken and the pig. This is a way that we teach agile, but you really want a small team. They're empowered. They make the decisions. You really don't want a committee to make decisions, though. So you want your team to have skin in the game, not just the product managers, but your engineers on the team to understand this too. All right. So quick question. Which of these 3 things does a product manager team need to implement a strategy? Thanks, Majan. How many of you think we need all 3 of these? Show of hands. How many of you think we need, yep, all 3? Okay. How many of you think we just need 2 of these? All right. Very good. The correct answer is we just need 2 of these. You don't need consensus outside the team, but you just need collaboration and alignment here. So that's the one aspect. And within a team, you might want consensus within the team, but outside the organization, dealing with sales and marketing and others, you need alignment and collaboration, but the product team should be making the decision, and head of product. They should be one making the main decisions as far as implementing your strategy. All right. So 2 ways of thinking about effectiveness versus strategy, and it's similar to one we talked about, market following versus market leading. Operational effectiveness is in your market. Do you perform similar activities better and you execute a little better in some aspects, versus strategic positioning, which is we do different things than our competitors. It's a unique value proposition. We're hard to copy. It's a first mover advantage that helps us. Either way can work, but you need to understand in your business where you operate. And if you own multiple businesses where you have rolled up some products, you may operate differently here. You may be a strategic positioner in one, but in others, you just need to operate better than your peers. So quick show of hands, are any of you operating on the right side today, that you are strategically in a better position than your competitors? Yep, good. Very good. So we're going to focus on some strategy concepts. We're going to go through them fairly quickly due to time today, of some high-level strategy principles. These are principles that are taught at business schools. And the reason we bring this up, a lot of CEOs, CFOs, marketing teams, they think this way. And this is how they're taught at the leading business schools around strategy concepts. If you bring in folks like McKinsey or Bain or BCG, they are all taught and think this way. A lot of investors think this way from a strategy. And these are business strategy, just not product strategy concepts. So very similar ones. And the key items, what we mentioned, being different, hard to copy, clear choices, the adoption curve, product market fit, adoption life cycle, growth levers, aligning with the business, showing impact and product vision. We've got one slide on each of these, but you'll need these as some of these bags of tricks to understand how to win in your market. And a product manager should understand all 10 of these, but may only leverage 2 or 3 of these going forward. So if you hear them speak a certain way, they should be articulating or explaining some of these concepts. If they're not, that means they're missing some core strategy, business concepts. They may know their market well, but not how to win in the market. Or they may if they came from an engineering background, they may not think this way. So it's just some very simple concepts that we're going to talk about. So being different, think of Slack versus Teams. So what are the key differences? And you can put this in the chat here. What are the differences between these 2 products here?
One is gross. Which one?
Eric, anti-Microsoft, Arrington. All right. So the differences, anybody else want to articulate what the differences are? Their approach to Slack, more open. Yep. To what audience would you say, Stephen? Are they more open for a sales team or for a marketing team?
That's a good point. No, I think for development teams is what I was thinking.
Exactly. Nicholas kind of hit it. It's more enterprisey.
Enterprisey.
Yeah, it's a good approach. You've got to handle a lot of different stakeholders. Slack is really big in software as a service companies. They generally start in an engineering team, and so it's a very different problem they're trying to solve. Teams is designed to work well with SharePoint and the other Office suite, the authoring tools, which either way, both products to me, where they are today, are pretty impressive in what they've built, how they've built them. And as consultants, we have to operate in both of those. So they targeted a different market, which led to the features that they built. But I think right now Teams is a much larger market share overall for collaboration at what they do. But yes, Eric captures it well. They're very good for what they try to do. And if you're the poor CIO that has to pick these tools for the enterprise, you're going to frustrate someone and delight someone else. So just keep that in mind. But again, they tried to solve a similar problem, but solved it in different ways for different markets. All right, let's talk quickly about hard to copy. And we're just going to pick one of these, and I'm going to pick the IKEA one. What's hard to copy about IKEA versus their competitors?
The supply
Yep.
chain, the confusing directions, interesting.
That he nailed that, which is really interesting because
Multi-language directions.
yeah, well, they don't have languages
No
usually,
language.
so it has to be drawn. That's one of their key criteria for their products is we can't have 50 different variations of instructions. It needs to be intuitive for people to read those. So that's hard to copy. How do you build something that can be easy to put together in a lot of different markets? Yeah, very good. Any other aspects of IKEA that are hard to copy? I think Christopher nailed it. The Swedish meatballs are pretty easy to copy if you've been there. All right. Clear choices. So Domino's Pizza, this is a very American example here. When I grew up, Domino's was the cheap, not tasty pizza. But over time, their stock price, and this is pre-COVID, so this is a snapshot of their stock, but their growth from 2010 to 2018 was outpacing, um, basically the FANG group here. So did any of you know what choices Domino made back around 2012 in order to win their market share? All right, for those of you that don't know, they really did two major areas of focus. One is they completely changed the menu. They had to compete and not as tasty. Now, granted, they're not the tastiest pizza that you've had, but they're way better than the pizza I recall from my 20s. But they also hired their own engineering team to create the best experience from managing, ordering, and delivering pizza. So they were the first ones to do the pizza tracker to see where it is, manage everything in the app. So they were really the first pizza company to have an app. They were one of the first delivery companies or food companies to have a good app. So that's what set them apart from their peers and really took a brand that was kind of stagnant and has really become the leading pizza brand in the US. Yeah, exactly. All right. Great Clips. Do any of you know Great Clips? And this may be a male thing. Only the men get their hair. Great Clips is okay. So for Christopher, it may not be in your market, but do you have oh, Doug, help me on the competitors to Great Clips.
Sport Clips is the one that I
Sport-
go to.
Yeah.
Cost Cutters.
Yep. Yep. It's basically a franchise of haircuts that used to be $10 or lower. That price point has changed, but the idea is mainly for people that need to get their hair cut frequently, that's short, or you have family members and you don't really need to get the hair styled. So they were stagnant about 15 years ago, but their CEO made several decisions here. And the way they approached this here, they had to make some choices here. And the question for you guys is, which of these, and I already kind of jumped ahead here, but how they focused on winning in market. And so their goals were, their key initiatives were, they said, we're going to know more about our customers than our competitors, meaning they want to know everything about their customers. Everybody that walks into their store, they want to know more than their competitors. They also want to have the widest and deepest database, which means they know more attributes about their customers than others. Those in turn drove what let them become number one in their market, in the low cost haircut market. And it was becoming the best in their market, winning in market by knowing more about their customers. And in order to do that, they needed to have more attributes about their customers than anyone else. Now, for most of you that know customer market research, that's not the easiest thing to do, or maybe the right thing to do, but it was a clear direction and a strategy that helped their software teams focus on how to win in the market. All right. S curves, these are just adoption curves. The important thing is here in your market is how fast are people adopting the product you're selling in your market. Okay. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. You can see that, older technologies took long adoption curves, and the vertical chart here is % of US households that had these particular products in their house at that time. And what you can see here is as the curve keeps getting steeper and steeper and steeper. So in your case, you have to understand, where are you in the market today? Are you in the early part of the curve or in the late part of the adoption curve for your customers, as far as how much adoption you've gotten in your market? All right. So kind of a similar curve here is product market fit, which is in your market. It's just a slightly longer curve. Are you early in the market? Is the market growing itself? Is it the mature side? Or remember at the top of the S curve, this is when the market itself declines here. So this is technically the second derivative of actually the first derivative of the curve that you just saw earlier, which is where are you in this market today? And your product team needs to know this because they are going to tackle the market differently in different ones. If you're in either the takeoff stage, the shakeout, you start to see consolidation where companies have bought and rolled up some things versus the market's getting saturated. It really can't take on any more new entrants. And then lastly, in the decline, you start wanting to save costs. So at that point, for you, those of you, are any of you in the decline phase in a market today?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. It's not a fun place to be.
Good. Nobody
it-
claims the saturation or decline.
Exactly, Stephen. Yeah, different product lines are going to be different. Is that what you mean by different product lines, or just features of the product?
No, I mean product lines. Yeah,
Yeah.
like three distinct product lines that are in different phases.
Exactly. So yet another reason why your product managers need to behave differently. Product manager in one product line is doing different activities than a different product manager in a different market. So again, if you're managing product managers, it's just something you need to understand and be conscious of, particularly if you take a product manager from a rapidly growing area and put them in a different area where it's more of a declining market. All right. Christopher, you have a question?
Yeah, can we go back to the previous slide?
This
Yeah,
one or this one?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah, this
Yeah.
one. Thanks, Phil. So like if you feel like you're in an area where like the current solution, say the S curve is kind of at that maturation phase, like would you consider like the addition of a new S curve be new technology, and when that S curve is kind of between that takeoff and shakeoff phase, it starts to overlap the previous S curve, like would you consider that kind of like a disruptive introduction to the market?
It is it can be a disruption where you've taken somewhere in your customers' work activities they do. You can create a new adoption curve, which means your buyers, it's typically a different set of buyers in that market, right? You may be selling today to older buyers, but the folks that are going to adopt your product may not be those older buyers. They're going to be early adopters, which I think we have a slide that shows that earlier, which
Okay.
it's a similar shape, but yeah, it's that, and you'll see disruptions in every market, typically due to some introduction of new technology in that market. Okay.
Gotcha.
You get these new curves. And I had a whole set of slides that we skipped that I might introduce in the next one that kind of speaks to that, of waves of technology and how they disrupt markets. So hopefully you're a
Gotcha.
disruptor.
Trying to be. Makes you think
Yeah,
of the like I guess like the Kodak business case, right? Going back to the business school stuff, right? With the digital photography and
exactly.
makes that the curves make me think of that business case. Sorry.
Yeah. So I'll leave these on the leave behind, but the founder of Benchmark, Andy Ratcliffe, he describes the challenge that you're in right now, which is trying to find that product market fit. And a lot of times, your initial hypothesis is not correct. That's why it's so important to operate. And this is how they think about these, because they are VCs, not private equity, that are trying to invest early in market. And so he describes a bit more that a lot of times you'll stumble into market fit, and there's a lot of serendipity there. But your point is you got to follow really good behaviors. So the way he looks at it, he has these three kind of quick wins here. When a good team meets a lousy market, the market wins. No matter how good that team is, if the market's not ready, it's not a good one to be in. If a lousy team meets a great market, the market wins. You're going to lose to your competitors if you don't understand how to win. So you have to find that right mix of great team meets a great market. And sometimes the market isn't ready yet. So that's an important thing to know in your space. And we've evaluated quite a few companies that are too early to the game, and we help companies that are too late to the game on these. It's a basic way to say this. So you just need enough cash here in order to win. So if you look at the top 20 reasons startups fail, the number one is the market need isn't there. You had a hypothesis, it wasn't there, and unfortunately you ran out of cash. Those are kind of related in some ways, but the third is not the right team. You see a lot of ones here, but just keep a focus that the number one reason startups fail is the market need is not there. And you have to constantly make sure you're focused on that market need, no matter where you are in that curve. But early stages, you need to think this way. All right. Just some quick terminology you need to understand. Do all of you know the TAM, SAM, and SOM by show of hands? If not, we'll leave this as Eric does.
Eric does.
Yeah. Your investors think this way. They're asking these questions all the time. Your sales team thinks this way. The total addressable market is typically very, very large. And this is everybody that you could possibly serve. Think of this over the next 3 to 5 years of where the product could evolve or go. The service addressable market is what your product has today, how it's shipped today, how it can meet that subset of the market, and its existing capabilities. The service obtainable is what you can probably sell to in that, and it's usually your 1-year target, what you can do. You just can't win all customers that are in that SAM. So that's the subset of TAM, SAM, and SOM. And they're going to be different for different product lines. So it's very helpful if engineers understand this, of understanding the relative size of your TAM, your SAM, and your SOM. And if you're in a company that does a lot of acquisitions, and you're trying and you have similar ones, you need to really get a good sense of the different SOMs and SAMs within those kind of similar markets. So just some terminology you need to understand. Your product managers should own this. If not own it, work tightly with their head of strategy to understand what these markets are. All right, Christopher, this is kind of similar to what you were asking about. Similar to the adoption curve, there are types of buyers in your market. And so the innovators are early on. Then you have the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards. The reason we want product managers to think this way is that your innovators are very eager to try to solve a key pain point for what they have, but they're willing to take on less functionality that an early majority would need. So the idea here is to prove market fit, to evaluate it. Your early innovators are willing to take some missing features. They may have to rekey some data. They may have to, do something in one system and do it with another. But they are the ones that start out early on. The early adopters need a bit more functionality to make the job easier. Early majority is where you typically have a lot more integration, a lot more feature sets to win a lot of the bigger customers. And then the late majority are those that are just following the early majority. So product managers need to understand what you're designing for. Engineers do also, that you are probably, as you launch something new or even a new feature subset within your current customer base, there will be a subset of your market that will take on those new modules or new features here. So really important for your team, not just your product managers, but your engineers to understand this adoption life cycle here. All right. So the growth levers, this is when you're in a mature audience. I'm sorry, not audience, but a mature market. You're still going to be tasked as a company or as a product team to take on new markets, which are new sub-markets, the audiences, or get new revenue streams from those current markets here. So your first option is if you're dealing with the same audience and you have the same capabilities, you're going to have to optimize. You have to cut costs. You just have to get better at delivering what you have today. You probably have to pay down technical debt. If you're trying to capture new markets, this could be expansion, and this could be not just country expansion, but if you operate in a state, going to another state, you're taking the same capabilities, but you're trying to just enhance that and go to a very similar market that's adjacent. New revenue streams is typically adding new modules where you can get additional licenses paid or sell additional services. So it's the same audience, but you're providing more value to that audience. This is helpful. We'll talk about this in the next session in the jobs to be done concept of how do you get more from the same particular persona. And then lastly, if you're doing both of these, this is kind of tricky for product managers where you're adding new features and trying to tackle new audiences. You need to be aware of your backlog of which items are focused on which. And engineers need to understand that because who they're designing for, who they're building for. So not fun to be in the bottom left, challenging to be in the top right, but you might be operating in both of these throughout your backlog. But product managers are trying to grow the business. The CEO is trying to grow the business. And just think about this in your planning cycles, which way you're trying to focus here with your growth levers. All right. We do run into companies that actually lack a business strategy. Usually the business strategy should be set by the CEO and some other groups around defining how we're going to win in a market and where we're going to be in 2 to 3 years. If you do not have a business strategy, then the product team will have to fill the void. They'll have to create that, do the market research, inspire, and say, how are we going to win in market? So this is where you need to get alignment. We do find that a new product manager comes in, but you have I would say prior CEO, head of sales that have their concept and don't really have a strategy that fits the current market. So that's not easy to win in that situation, but you need that product management mindset of having a clear strategy. So I know we're going kind of quickly on this, but if you don't have a business strategy, not a good place to be in. Your product team should help guide that or lead that. All right, I'm going to skip these next two. The goal, though, is the product team has to show impact to the bottom line, to the business. I'll leave these behind of how you get there. But I will do just one quick example of a product vision. The vision is really inspirational. Where are you going to be 3 to 10 years out? How do you get there? It should be inspirational. It should tug on folks' heartstrings, but it's thinking long term of where's the market going to be. And our former coworker that did this, she was at the Guardian before. Their goal was to beat the New York Times, and they were focused on how could they grow their business. And just with their digital, the way they attack digital, they grew their audience 5 times, and they became the global leader for many years in the digital news business. For a while, this is about a 10-year-old strategy, but that was the case before. All right, I'm going to skip this one and this 2 here, leave this behind. But the one take I want you guys to have is discovery, is the concept of discovery. So we talked about a lot of strategy principles, and I can stay on for some folks later after the 1 hour mark to go back and touch on some topics. But I did in our last few minutes want to cover discovery. Just by quick show of hands, how many of you are actively involved in discovery today for your product? Eric? Yep.
Chris?
All right. So discovery is really deciding what should we do, and it's typically done mainly by the product managers. Your goal is to avoid wasting a lot of the company's money with engineering time to not build things that people are not going to want here. So you're focused on what's the best opportunity to pursue, what should we do to be successful, and what is the best way to achieve our customers' outcome and our business outcomes. So it's really focused from the outside in, and it's not just about finding solutions, but it's about finding opportunities, which is what are the pain points from your customer's perspective. So a lot of times people do discovery. It's really to understand what solutions do I need to build for my loudest customers. That's really not what discovery is. Discovery is really trying to see where can we stand out in the market. So one book that I'd want you guys to read is Teresa Torres's Continuous Discovery Habits. She has some real good examples in here of going through what are called opportunity solution trees. They're kind of like OKRs, but they take it down a level here to help you understand different ways to try to solve problems for your customers. And it's a way to continually focus on the market. And this is how you do continuous discovery, which is not just listening to the loudest customer, but looking for opportunities to help solve things. And by drawing them out in this tree structure, it really helps resolve some tension within your teams around what to build, how to build it, what things to go after. So we have a case study in here that we can walk you through. The example here was what hit the product team's roadmap was go rebuild a legacy solution because it was a monolith and it wasn't easy to interact. And so people were copying and pasting data to other systems here. So they said, we need to do this because we need to launch products faster. But there were actually 2 other opportunities that they didn't really focus on, which are by increasing market share and margins. They looked at, can we integrate our M&As faster, and we can reduce the systems that we have to run our business. By looking at those opportunities, they actually came up with different solutions that were a lot easier, a lot safer, a lot smaller. And so they had 3 different choices. So the point here is for you to just kind of use this framework when you get tasked with a very big activity, something like rewriting a monolith or doing something big, that there may be some other business outcomes that you can come up with sort of more creative solutions to solve your challenges here. So we'll leave this wording behind here for you guys. All right. But to kind of close out here with today's session is the idea of what this empowered product team is. And this is closing out where Marty Kagan, one of his key messages is what is an empowered product team? And the thing that the product team is really trying to do, and it's really during the discovery phase, is mitigating 4 types of risks. He described earlier there's a function, 3 different functions of the business, but you're really doing 4 things. One is the value, which is, will people buy what we're trying to deliver? That's the role of the digital product manager. Then you have to think about usability. Can customers use it? This is what a designer needs to do. So, they'll buy it if it's usable. Feasibility is really the technology lead, which is, can we build it with our skill set? And then business viability is, will this work for our business? So this means the product manager needs to understand, is sales ready for this? Is marketing ready for this? Is customer support ready for this? Is even billing and others ready for this? So this is understanding how it fits within your business. And those are different folks and different teams. The product manager leads this, but discovery, as you're launching new features and capabilities, they need to think through these risks. Try to get a sense of this before you start spending engineering dollars on this. That's the goal of discovery here. So I know we've slammed through a lot of stuff very quickly today, but some books for you guys to read. Kagan has 3 books out. I'm just showing 2 of these. He has a new one called Transform. That would probably be the first one to read. Get his newsletter. He has very well-written newsletters. Teresa Torres's book is very good about discovery. And then another one that's similar is The Role of Product Management by Pragmatic Marketing. They describe what a head of product does versus a individual product manager does for a line of business. And then the last one that they describe is, what is the role of a technical product manager, with more tactics of what to do, though. So a lot of good reading. Each of these are very easy to read. They're well written. They're not as dense as some architectural stuff you'll read. I haven't done the audiobooks for these, but these are pretty quick reads. And as Eric said, or Doug said, the new one is Transformed from Marty Kagan. So folks, we went fast today. I will stay on. Typically I tried to cram about 2 hours of content into an hour today, but I'll stay on for questions for those of you that need to jump to a next meeting. All right.
2 weeks from now,
Yep.
product management techniques.
Exactly. Marie is still on.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks,
Absolutely.
guys. I
Thank you.
unfortunately I always have questions, but I do have to run early.
All right.
Now today. But
Okay.
Phil and Doug, I appreciate it as always. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend.
You bet.
Glad to be
All
here,
right.
Chris.
Take care.
Be good.